Hello and welcome to the Happy PharmD podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's guest is going to be a pharmacist who, like many of us in our careers, has experienced burnout. And I feel that this is becoming a more and more common topic or discussed topic, or at least, we're being made more aware of it. Maybe more people are speaking about it, but it's been around for a lot longer than we think. But I feel that it's becoming more and more common to hear about burnout, especially in any medical profession, but especially in pharmacy. And today's guest, we're going to talk about, what exactly is a way to get out of that, how to kind of self-reflect and think of ways or, types of pharmacy that, when we think about it, what do we really enjoy about the pharmacy in terms of the profession itself, and what fields or what aspects of it would truly make us happy, when you reflect back and think away of where you currently are in your career, and, you look back and think, well, I really enjoyed doing this. It'd be really probably beneficial and something I would truly look forward to doing if I focused my career on this aspect of pharmacy. And I really hope this episode helps in terms of, determining ways to network and just, feeling that you're not alone in this. Many of us experience burnout, myself included, and it's definitely a real issue. But I'd like to welcome our next guest, Miss Katie Taylor.
Hello out there, and thank you for joining me on the Happy PharmD podcast. This is Chris Bakley, and I'm your host. Before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to make a special announcement to everyone out there. We are offering free access to a webinar for everyone out there that is interested. It is our Career Masterclass. This will primarily help focus on how to escape burnout, get your job offers regularly, and to finally take control of your career. Please feel free to sign up on our link to secure and register for a spot, and it is free. The link is thehappypharmd.com/begin. Again, that is thehappypharmd.com/begin. Feel free to check it out and sign up again for your free spot for this class. Thank you so much, guys, and let's go to the show.
Well, welcome to the Happy PharmD podcast, Katie Taylor. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm excited.
Thank you. So awesome to have you here. So I wanted to begin first with just a little bit about yourself. If you could just kind of give us a brief summary about, where you went to school, career-wise, where you started, and kind of throughout the years where you are to now.
Sure. I actually started with an undergrad in biotechnology from Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Worcester, Mass., and then went immediately into management consulting, serving the pharma, biotech, and medical device industries, and did that for several years for a couple different companies. And then my mentor said, you know what, you should go back and get your PharmD. So I decided, hey, let's get a doctorate in 3 years. That sounds easy. And so I went to Albany College of Pharmacy in upstate New York and got the accelerated PharmD, which they tell you is a PharmD in 3 years, but it's 3 years and 2 years, and then a year of rotations like everybody else. So I wanted letters after my name and a little gray hair, and that gave me both. So that's how the PharmD went very quickly. After that, I decided to go into clinical practice, and I started with a short stint in retail. I realized it wasn't for me, and then went into hospital pharmacy. And at that time in 2006, 2007, PharmDs were the shiny new penny. So with one critical care rotation, I was asked by a hospital to be their critical care pharmacist. So with 5 weeks of training, and I learned by doing. And through, the next 13 years, I was a critical care pharmacist, first at a small community hospital, then at a larger, and ended up at a large academic 650-bed medical center, working second shift, which brought me, I was in charge of 5 ICUs, 2 step-down units, and 4 cardiology floors just to myself. So about 150 critical care and cardiology patients just for me. So inevitably with that came a little bit of burnout.
Just a little.
So I had done a lot of years of critical care and looked at my job and was like, this does not fit my life. I was working second shift, so I was working till midnight every day, plus weekends and holidays and all the other things that come with healthcare. And I'm like, what is my favorite part of this job? And I realized it was 2 things. Teaching. I loved working with medical residents, pharmacy residents, nurses, doctors, etc., and teaching them what I knew. And second was project work. And so about 2 years ago, I decided to make a radical change, and I left clinical practice and I went back to the consulting company with the mentor who originally told me to go get the PharmD. And we're doing kind of a startup entrepreneurial thing there with management consulting. I'm still in the pharmaceutical industry. And I started to get into academia. And now I teach at 2 universities, one medical terminology online at Hudson University, and the second I teach in person for Worcester State, and I teach drugs and society, which is one of my most favorite things. So undergraduate students, multidisciplinary, and get to teach them about licit and illicit drugs of use and abuse and how that interacts with factors in our society. And that's where I am today.
Wow, I actually also went to Albany College of Pharmacy. So
Oh.
I forgot that you also went there. So
Yeah.
I don't think they do the accelerated program anymore, but I give you a lot of credit for.
No, after 3 years, they stopped it because it was that annihilating. And actually just last year, they rebooted it again. So
Did they
we'll see
really?
how
Oh
that goes.
boy.
Yeah, up at the Vermont campus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, I probably would have been interested in it as well, but that's a lot of dedication for.
Yes.
You definitely want to be determined, or definitely for sure that's what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I guess I kind of want to back up a little bit.
Sure.
How did you make that? I guess because a lot of pharmacists, these days
Mm.
are facing burnout like you did. I think you said after 13 years at your
Yes.
current position. Okay.
Yep.
Now, how did you decide to make that transition, or how did you even go about getting out of where you were? For I guess because a lot of people, I think, in this current time feel pretty stuck where they are.
Well, we do feel stuck. And one of the biggest reasons we do is, the golden handcuffs. A pharmacist makes a good living. And actually we make a great living. And it's hard to leave a great living to try something that's unknown, that may be a bigger risk and lower paid. But I don't think anybody makes a change until where they're going is less uncomfortable than where they are. So when you really get into a situation where you're very, very uncomfortable, that's when an alternative starts to seem a little bit more attractive because you're not comfortable where you are anymore. So I mitigated my risk. So I started looking for side hustles. So that would be, okay, I can always be a per diem clinical pharmacist, and I still am to this day. I still work a couple shifts a month up at the same institution. I, started to apply for online teaching things. You have a terminal degree, you can teach in pretty much, a variety of universities, especially now with the online. An online course you can teach as a side hustle. And the third was to look for an in-person teaching because lecturing was really where my passion was. And so when you have 3 side hustles, it's a little easier to jump off the cliff. Yep. To do something that's a little more unknown, that's a little higher risk. But for me too, it was because I was a pharmacist that I was able to make the transition. Because let's say I go to the startup and I try it and it doesn't work. Guess what? I'm still a pharmacist. So my worst case scenario is going back to where I am already, or I was already before I made the change. Mm-hmm. My best case scenario is this new thing completely takes off. I'm happy. My work-life balance is better and I'm more fulfilled professionally. So when you really weigh the pros and cons, there was the pros really did outweigh the cons of not making a change.
I love that way of looking at it, actually, that you really it can't be any worse than where you already are, basically.
Yeah.
In terms of, I guess we can kind of break down each individual side hustle if you don't mind. So with the teaching though, so have you ever taught before, or was that brand new for you?
I had precepted PharmD students for years, but those are short stints. It's not a traditional lecture sort of thing. I had given a variety of talks, paid and unpaid, to physicians and pharmacists. Like, I would do grand rounds, individual floors, like nursing educators would ask me to like, can you teach our nurses about pain management? And I would put together PowerPoints. So when I made my resume, I really focused on the fact that I was a non-traditional educator, but an educator nonetheless. I mean, pharmacists, we know how to communicate drug information. That's what we do. Every phone call we take is communicating drug information. So really just kind of repackaging what I already did was enough to get my foot in the door. And it's kind of a novel thing to some of the universities out there who want people who have done, not just had always been in academia forever.
Mm-hmm.
So no, not a formal academic, but had always kind of been a teacher, just not an official lecturer in the traditional sense.
Gotcha. And was that, in terms of trying to find that opportunity, was it pretty difficult to kind of get your foot in the door to start that side hustle?
No, one of the side hustles was an online ad that I just applied for and I got a call. So that one was pretty simple. The other one took a little more massaging, but it was just, instead of just putting the online thing, I sent a personal message to the department chair who was very receptive to my story and my spin that maybe an HR representative may not be, but as the department chair, he saw an opportunity as well. So I think we have a different way we can spin things things if you decide to package it in a way
Mm-hmm.
that really showcases what our abilities are, even if they haven't been done in the traditional sense.
Gotcha. And then you began another side hustle. So I guess if you want to go into that a little more in depth on top of the teaching.
Well, the consulting, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So the management consulting. So again, what management consulting is any company, it doesn't matter what industry you are, will hire experts to help them iron out their problems. And it could be things they don't know how to do, they don't have the resources to do, or they want an objective third party to come in and give their, opinion on things. The way that my firm does consulting is we're scientists first. Both the founder and I are pharmacists. So we can really understand chemicals at the molecular level because that's what we do. And then when it's easier to apply business strategies on top of the science than for someone who has no science background, just a business background, to apply the science on top of that.
Gotcha.
So we come from a very scientific background, so we can read medical journals, and we can really understand in preclinical development what's going on and where the unmet needs are. And then myself being a clinician, I know on the front lines what is needed, like what we really need versus what's just another pretty package that we don't need from a pharmaceutical company.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So by doing that, we have a unique approach to clients, so we can give them a perspective that they can't necessarily get just from a traditional MBA type consulting firm. And I'll tell you, one thing that has been very pleasantly surprising is the power of the PharmD degree.
Okay.
Where sometimes in retail and hospital, it gets diluted. We're surrounded by PharmDs, so we forget that we're smart and we know stuff. But I've been in more than one room with very, very senior level executives, CEOs, chief scientific officers, et cetera. And when I see my background, I get a, whoa, you know exactly what we need to know. And we forget how powerful that PharmD degree is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of been nice to see that there is appreciation and value to that outside of just clinical practice. When you look at pharma and biotech, it's a lot of power there as well.
Absolutely. Well, I feel like that's a good point because it kind of feels like the pharmacy field in general, or for pharmacists, has become so saturated that it's, you kind of don't give yourself the credit because you feel like there's so many pharmacists with the PharmD, unfortunately.
I agree, but if you really look at the data, we're in the top 2 to 3% of the nation as far as education is that doctorate degree. And we forget that. And I think pharmacists have, as a profession, we have really bad self-esteem. Like we feel good about ourselves, but not that good about ourselves. And we don't really pat ourselves in the back enough for what we accomplish, especially now where residencies, PGY1s, PGY2s, board certification. So it's not just the doctorate, it's all this stuff on top of it. And we're still kind of passive in celebrating our knowledge for the most part in the general public and even in the institutions which we practice.
Absolutely. No, that's awesome that and for how long were you doing? You said you were doing that before you went into working pharmacy, correct?
I did it about 5 years before I went back to pharmacy school. And then I've periodically helped this particular colleague out, this mentor out over the years. Part-time projects here or there, be a thought leader or, a sounding board for him. And then I went back part-time in 2017. And then I went full-time about a year and a half ago.
Wow. Okay.
So, and before that, I was doing a bunch of hustles, but I still have, 5 streams of income. But hopefully the goal is when the startup really takes off, I will start to peel back away some of those other things.
And then your third is the academia role. Is that correct? Okay. And then in terms of the first role in terms of kind of online and teaching, how do you feel with that role in terms of making that transition?
Those transitions were a little hard and not hard. Curriculum development is a bear. So when you start teaching as a brand new professor with a brand new class, I guess it's also kind of the mentality of the, high achieving, perfectionist, detail oriented pharmacist personality that a lot of us have. I didn't want to just do a cookie cutter thing out of a textbook. I made 1,100 slides from scratch for this class because I feel the issues of drugs of abuse, addiction, the stigma surrounding it, it's so important. I really wanted to do the kids as best justice as I could. And now I'm in my 4th semester. So now it's more smooth sailing, but the first semester was a bit of a bear, staying a week ahead of the kids. So that transition, the lecture piece was never super tough, but the curriculum development to massage it and present it the way that I thought was important to get the message across did take some doing. To do it again, I may stick to a more traditional realm, but I think it was a good experience for me to really have full ownership and know the nuts and bolts of everything I possibly wanted to say to the students.
Now, how did in terms of, did you have specifically with your past work, or what kind of
Mhm.
connection did you have like to want to teach that specific course?
Well,
What drove you to
working
do that?
Yeah, well, working in critical care for that many years, you would see every toxidrome known to man. So literally, you'd have doctors come to you and be like, I have a patient who overdosed on
Mm,
XYZ. What do I do? What do I not do? And we don't learn this in pharmacy school. At least we didn't back
mhm.
in my day. So it was a lot of, I will check and get back to you.
Yeah.
So you work enough years in critical care, you start to put together your portfolio of crazy cases, and then you're able to draw from that. And then I also dealt with so many patients with addiction issues. I spent so much time with pain management. All of these things go hand in hand. And then even working in the cardiothoracic ICU with a lot of the endocarditis patients, secondary to
Hmm.
IV drug
Yeah.
use,
Hmm.
just became a population that I saw a lot and had a certain soft spot in my heart for. And that's kind of how I found, had some real draw to this class, because I think it's really, really understood. The population's understood, the issues are understood, are not understood. The drugs are not understood, even by pharmacists. When I first started reading, I'm like, peyote, what is that? So it was an education of myself as well as what I now, pay forward to the students.
Gotcha. No, I mean, I think that's an awesome thing, especially to give back to the students and kind of with your personal experience and everything like that.
Mhm.
I feel like that's, some pharmacists may be interested in the academia role.
Yeah.
I know some people, it's also very hard to get up in front of a crowd of X
Hmm.
amount of students and
Yeah.
to, give a lecture. I mean, I took public speaking in college and I feel like that helped, but still don't know if I'd be
Yeah.
able to talk in front of 200 kids or however many. Was it also, in terms of making that transition, was it helpful that you had that background, or was it pretty easy to make that, or difficult to make that connection to get
Well,
into a college?
Well, I've always been a talker. I grew
Okay.
up in the theater, those sorts of things. So the public speaking thing was never really an issue for me. For those pharmacists who do have more of an issue with public speaking, online classes need professors who are highly organized, who are detail oriented, who can manage email, all of those different things, and you never speak in front of a group. So that's another way to get into it. All you have to do is learn fairly basic programs like Blackboard or Canvas. Those are
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
number 1 and 2 ones out there. If you have a level of proficiency in that, I teach medical terminology. It's not rocket science. Any of us speak that language, but really, get a little bit of proficiency in those two things, find an online gig, and there are hundreds of them and more growing all the time. That's another kind of side hustle to get into that. But I do need to mention, nobody gets rich in academia. It's a tiny supplement because you like doing it.
Hmm.
It's not going to pay you for your mortgage,
Yeah.
but it may give you some job satisfaction that you're not getting in your 9 to 5 gig, your day
Hmm.
gig.
Hmm.
And it can tiptoe into something a little bit different. But yeah, you're not going to make a ton of money unless you start teaching multiple courses.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and how many hours would you say on top of your, I guess do you work full time with
I work
any of these side hustles, or is it
I
more
work
like
I work
split?
40 hours a week with the consulting company downtown, 40 plus ish is a startup, 4 shifts a month for the hospital, still up in Maine.
Okay.
And then with the side hustle, the online course, couple hours a week. It's really not incredibly strenuous. I grade homework, I send emails, I structure things. The in-person class, I'm teaching 2 sections this semester, which is very exciting. So it's 5 hours of lecture, and then with grading and all the other kind of paperwork sort of stuff, it's probably another 3 to 4 hours a week. So I'd say probably about 10 hours for the in-person for 2 classes, an hour to 2 tops for the online class, and then 40 hours a week for the day job, and then probably about 8 hours a week for the clinical practice that I still keep.
Okay. So, I mean, that's quite a bit of extra hours then to add into a regular 40-hour work week,
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, those are not on top of that's all of it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And I guess for those who are, I mean, I feel like a side hustle is becoming a very, common thing for
Yes.
especially pharmacists trying to, find
Hmm.
their niche in terms of just not sticking to straight pharmacy, or even
Hmm.
finding ways to improve our field of pharmacy.
Sure.
How would you feel like what is your best piece of advice for someone to start that if they haven't already, or how to kind of break out
Mhm.
of the norm of just a or not 9 to 5, we never have 9 to 5,
Yeah,
but
you never have 9 to
never
5.
have 9 to 5, but
If you
a
had 9 to
full-time
5, you wouldn't be
pharmacist,
looking for a
yes, but
side
like
hustle.
exactly, but of a full-time pharmacist who maybe feels burnout like you did,
Yeah.
to kind of find something that they truly enjoy, what would be like the first piece of advice you'd recommend to kind
I
of?
think the thing we really have to do is just baby steps. You don't have to make a radical change that rocks your complete existence. You really don't. It could be something small initially. It could even be something, that's even non-monetary. Something that's like philanthropy. You volunteer somewhere, just something to give yourself something besides the pharmacy. And it could still be volunteering in something healthcare, but baby step in. If you did one online course, you write up a resume, you write a couple, you write a cover letter, you do a couple online applications, you're out really nothing. And an online course was only going to be a couple hours a week. It's not going to be a ton of money, but it may give you just enough confidence to be like, if I can do this, I can do more. Like I said,
Yeah.
pharmacists,
Yeah.
we have low self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
We may not think we're qualified. We may not think we'd be good at it. We may not think they'd even consider us. I think you won't know until you tip your toes in the water. And that's my biggest piece of advice is you don't have to, everybody always says, swing for the fences. No, you can get a single. You don't have to swing for the fences because guess what? You're gainfully employed. It's a lot easier to look for something else while you have something. And that can turn into something bigger. It really, really can. And the other piece of advice is network. Talk to people who are doing what you want to do. I think LinkedIn is a wonderful resource and I think it's sometimes underutilized. Find somebody who's doing something that you think is interesting and just ask a question. But I think we have to get a little shaken up in our sense of complacency, take the tiniest bit of risk. And the worst case scenario is you were exactly where you started in the first place.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
why not go for it? Why not attempt to make something better? And if, you throw something at the wall, it doesn't stick, throw again. It doesn't mean that you failed. It just means that wasn't the right fit for you.
No, I love that. And especially, I mean, being pharmacists, especially with student loan debt as it is, I feel like it's very hard to want to take a risk, right? And to, especially if you're comfortable and or not comfortable, but it's a sense of comfort to be at your position, even though you may not truly enjoy it. It's very secure and difficult to want to step away from that pocket.
Yep.
But in terms of, I love how you brought up LinkedIn. Do you have, in terms of good ways for you to try and market with other people and to reach out to others? Any kind of advice that you find is most productive when you're networking on LinkedIn?
I think some of the things that are most productive is when you do have a LinkedIn request or you submit one to somebody else, write them a note why you're reaching out to them. And it could be something like, I see that you blah, blah, blah in your profile. I'd like to connect to speak about that sometime. Or I admire the work you do. Just something little, or, hey, we both went to Albany College of Pharmacy. I think that's a better way to get a connection. So if you ever do approach that person in the future, you already have a basis of communication that you can therefore go from. Be active on it. Post things, but don't post just to post. Post things that are meaningful to you. Post articles, share things, comment on other people's things, like things, use the site like it's meant to be. Use it as your news source. Use it as your headline. Also put things in like the CDC, or I do the National Institute of Drug Abuse, and kind of follow those postings so you kind of are in the know. And you'd be funny. You start to see the same people. You start to see people, because there's algorithms. If you search to like certain things, they're going to pop back up more. I think the biggest piece of advice is that initial contact, give a personal message. Because if not, you see people with 20,000 LinkedIn. I'm like, but do you know any of them?
Have you ever talked to any of them?
Have you ever talked to any of them? But if you even have the tiniest little thing, like, I really admire what you do. That's it. And now you have the beginning of a conversation that you can bring further.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like networking can be so powerful, and it's, I mean, it's some people, maybe shy or just not sure who to reach out to, but I feel like you said, just kind of initiating, that's awesome advice.
Yeah.
And also just in terms of burnout and kind of when you broke out of the critical care position to, doing a few side hustles and things that you truly seem to enjoy much more. How has your work-life balance changed?
It's actually so much better. I know it doesn't sound like that, but it is, because now it's choice instead of being forced to do things. So, I choose how much I work or not work. It uses every part of my skill set instead of just one. So I can be more refreshed, even with more hours, because I can pivot to a different sort of activity that uses a different part of my brain or a different part of my skill set, which is great. Where I felt clinical practice really used one piece of me. The other thing is that I worked second shift. So every night until midnight, I was working. Not many people around at 9 a.m. I can hang out with you. So I found myself saying no to every single social thing that was out there, unless it was on my one off day and not my third weekend.
Mm.
So now my evenings are mine as far as that's concerned. And because I control a lot of when I do things, because I control when I grade papers, I can control when I do my online class, because I'm a very good time manager. My work-life balance is much, much better. I come home every day to let my dog out and take her for a walk. I can date, I can see friends, I can, take a day off here or there to go somewhere for the weekend. It's much, much better because I have choice and I feel more ownership in what I do as opposed to being owned, which is how it can sometimes feel when you work for a larger institution.
Absolutely. No, I feel like taking control of your own career and having a life,
Hmm.
like your life back to yourself and not
Yeah.
just feeling like you're stuck with the same schedule every week or every month.
Yeah.
It makes such a huge difference.
Flexibility makes a big, big difference. Yeah.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Mhm.
And while we're wrapping up here, for those who are, in the situation that we both were in, because I was also suffered burnout in retail pharmacy
Mhm.
and just had to get out of it. For those that are still in that position where they feel almost stuck, like they have,
Mhm.
cement blocks to their feet and just can't really move, what would be like the first start for them to get out? What like the biggest things that you would recommend? I know reaching out on LinkedIn,
Mhm.
networking, but in terms of for those who are just kind of intimidated maybe by the process to kind of,
Sure.
even if it's not a side hustle, where would you
Mhm.
start for those to try and get out of that?
I would really take a look inside and really almost catalog what your strengths are. What is the best part of your day and the best part of your favorite part of the job that you're currently doing? And what are the sort of tasks and activities and even brain work that really kind of jazzes you? So if you really understand like what is the best part of what you're doing currently and you put it down in front of you, you can kind of start to see that's how I want to more be spending my day instead of the XYZ activity that's draining the life out of you.
Hmm.
When you kind of can see it in front of you, you get a better idea of what may be able to fulfill that in an alternative. But I think a lot of the biggest reason we do not move is fear.
Yes.
We are
Yes.
just so scared. So, you can do fear mitigation. What are you really scared about? What is the worst case scenario? And if that happened, what would I do about it?
Hmm.
And really, when you lay it all out in front of you and be like, this is what I'm most scared of. This is the worst case scenario, but I could mitigate it by doing XYZ. Go to the mitigation, and that change in the initially becomes much less scary.
Absolutely.
And that's
Absolutely.
called fear setting if anybody wants to Google that, because it's a very popular thing out there on the interweb at this time. But it really can. Fear is the reason we don't change.
I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree, especially in our role as pharmacists and with the
Mhm.
student debt. But I wanted to also quickly just make the comparison. So when you were in your old role
Mhm.
compared to now, and I know you listed that you're an avid power lifter and you've been able to
Yes.
read, I think you said 66 books in a
Six,
year.
66 bucks.
Were
Yep.
you ever able to do that before you made this transition?
Not reading for sure, because I didn't have my evenings to myself. I did maintain powerlifting because I could lift in the morning before that. But one of the other activities I do is I'm in a band, and I'm one of 10 musicians, and we do movie music covers. We're called Cinematic. Our latest gig is a Quentin Tarantino movie tribute.
Oh wow,
I
that's
couldn't
awesome.
do that because to get 10 musicians together to rehearse on second shift, it's total impossibility. Even living 2 states away, I have more flexibility to do this than I did living in the same city.
Hmm.
So yeah, I can still do my side hustles or my activities and turn them up because I now have the flexibility to move around my timeline to accommodate the things that make my life full.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
well beyond work.
No, I love that. That's so interesting as well. But I wanted to thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I know for all those out there just trying to figure out a way out of where they currently are if they feel
Mhm.
stuck. A lot of great advice. But I want to thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And if anybody wants to hit me up on LinkedIn, you can look me up. I'm Katie Taylor, PharmD BCPS.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again for joining me on the Happy Farm Day podcast. I really hope you took in some helpful and useful information from today's episode. I really enjoyed the perspective of hearing alternative options to pharmacy careers, especially in not only the ones that Katie mentioned, but just in general that there's a lot more out there, especially if you think about what truly motivates you and makes you happy than we may realize. One that Katie did mention that honestly I never really even
thought of could be a viable option was especially the online teaching option for pharmacists, especially if you're already beginning or in the process of beginning a side hustle, and potentially that's creating your own course regarding either pharmacy or it could be something completely different. There is that option of teaching it online as a side hustle, and I think that's definitely something that for most of us is very doable, especially outside of normal work hours. And I think that's a really awesome option. But not only that, but I really do want to stress the importance of pharmacy burnout. I feel that although it's it's definitely a very hot topic right now in the field of pharmacy, I still feel like there's a lot of pharmacists out there that are kind of just accepting their current situation. And I really want to stress how important I feel that it's not okay to feel burnt out all the time and to not really love what you're doing. I feel that it's very important to, although fear can be our worst enemy, I think it's very important to not accept where you currently are, unless you truly enjoy it and are really happy with the career path that you've taken. And I feel that it's important that if that's not the case, to really do your best. You owe it to yourself to find a better career option and to dig deep and determine what truly makes you happy and how can I get there. Speaking of that, please reach out to us. We would love to discuss. If you have any questions, we also do offer coaching, of course, and we have some courses, but truly we're here to speak with you and to just listen and hear what your thoughts are. If you have any questions, we'd love to speak with you. So please check us out on the happypharmd.com. And thank you so much again for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.